So I've been in the mental hospital, psych wards, in and out. I've mentioned this quite a few times, and I've had lots of different experiences. I would say like some of the worst experiences I've had are like the physical fights I've gotten into with the staff, and then just like encounters with other people where they say extremely disturbing things, especially regarding like rape and children and all that stuff. So those experiences are random and are not like every time I go into the psych ward, but they have happened. And then I was watching this other YouTuber just now, and she was talking about her experience in the psych ward and how they had taken her medication, and then they made her take her methadone 3 hours late. And I'm just like, whatever. What they had done to me was I had a UTI, and so I went to my PCP or an urgent care, I can't remember where. Anyways, got tested, got on antibiotics, but I had like done it weird, like I was like working or something, and so I didn't take the medication like immediately after I got it because antibiotics make you sick to your stomach, and I was working I think at Amazon at the time. I don't remember like exactly why I decided to wait and take the medication, like if I had like go off to work and then decided to take it after my 10-hour shift, or if I was like, I'm going to do this whenever I can eat, so I had waited until I could eat or something like that. I don't remember exactly why. But so I picked it up. So I went, got tested. I knew I had the UTI. I got tested, and then they, you know, put me on antibiotics. And what they do is they send the antibiotic, or they send the thing out to get like a culture test, and then they call you and tell you, hey, you need to switch antibiotics because what you're on is not actually treating what you have. So, anyways, I'd gone through all that and I was on the new antibiotics, and so I'd like picked them up and then took them, but it wasn't like in line with what the timing had said on the bottle. So like it said I had picked it up at such and such time, and I hadn't taken it for another 12 hours or so. So I had put off taking them, and so I took the first one, and then I continuously was taking them. Well, then I went into the hospital, and I brought them with me, and they were going based on, okay, if you were prescribed it on this day and you picked it up at this time, you would have taken the first one at this time that you picked it up, and then that means you would have this many. So then, if you took it at this time, you take the next one 12 hours later, so you need to take it at the next one at this time. And I was like, that's 12 hours off. I need it now. I don't need to wait. And because with antibiotics, if you wait, if you miss one or you put one off, the infection can stay. And I have UTIs quite often, so this is something I wanted to clear and be fucking done with it. So I explained it to him. I was like, I need to take the next one at this time. And they were just like, okay, and then refused to give them to me. And I was like asking them like, hey, I need to take that medication. And instead of telling me, no, because you picked it up at this time, we can't give it, because then I could have explained to them, well, actually, I had taken it 12 hours after that, so I'm scheduled to take this one now. I don't need to be waiting 12 hours, right? Because the timing was like off or whatever. And then they were just like, yeah, it's fine. We'll give them to you here in just a minute. In just a minute. Yeah, we'll give them to you in just a minute. And then it turned into, well, wait until snack time because you have to eat with these. And then snack time came around, which turned into, well, wait until lunchtime. And so I'm like, taking it like 4 or 5 hours later than what I'm supposed to is pissing me off. Well, then it turned into taking it a full 12 hours after. And I was just like, God damn it. And they're like, okay, it's bedtime. Like, it was past dinner, past second snack. And I go in there and they're like, we got your medication for you. And I'm like, about time, And I'm like, so do you have anything for me to eat with this? Because, like, snack time was like 3 hours ago. And they're like, no, you'll be fine. You're supposed to take antibiotics with food, but whatever. So, took the antibiotics, got up the next morning, pretty much the same thing on an empty stomach. They're like, hey, wake up. You have morning medication. and then they gave it to me, and then like we had breakfast like 3 hours later, and then same thing that night. They waited till like 3 hours after snack time to be like, here you go. So, anyways, I finished off the medication or whatever, and I called my doctor and I was like, hey, I want to be retested for a UTI because I think, since I didn't finish, or since I missed a dose, you know what I mean? And they were like, okay, yeah, come in and get tested, but you're probably going to be negative because the antibiotics should have worked even if you just missed one dose. But I'm looking at it like I get UTIs a lot, and I know that if I don't do the medication exactly right, I get screwed over. So I go in and get tested, test positive. They're like, hey, we already did the culture and everything, so we're just going to automatically put you on the antibiotics that we know are going to treat what came back from the culture the last time if it's the same infection, you know what I mean? And they're like, but we don't know for a fact if it's the same infection, so we're going to go ahead and send off the lab and see if it grows a culture. And I was like, okay. So they sent it off and they call me and they're like, you're good on the same medication that we've already put you on, so just finish that off and it should be cleared. So I finished it off, cleared up, but I was so pissed because I get UTIs a lot. And like, I'm like, why can't you guys just give me the medication right, And I had been there other times with the UTI and they had started me on medications when I was there. Um, but there was other, so that pissed me off because it was like I wouldn't have had to redo a whole dose of antibiotics if you guys would have just listened to me or had a conversation with me. That's something that really pisses me off, is they'll lie and they'll be like, oh yeah, 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 just give me a minute, and then they never do it. And if you stand up there, if you catch on like, hey, they're not actually going to be doing it, and you like stand up there and ask them again, then they're going to say, leave the nurse's station. I've already answered your question. If you continue to stand here, I'm going to have the security guard physically remove you from this area, and then they'll start saying stuff like, you can go to your room now, or you can go to the day room, go sit in the day room. And like, if you don't do that, if they say go sit in the day room and you go to your room, then they might have the security guard come in there and physically like remove you from your room. Or if they say go to your room and you go into the day room and you start talking to people, then this is pretty much the same thing. Is they'll go and they won't take you to your room, but they'll take you to the isolation room, which is like typically a padded room, but not always. um, then you've got like the people that are more tolerant, I guess, and like you can stand up there and just like wait on them to get it done. But um they'll still just be like, no, you can't, because like, you have no rights. You can't do anything, you don't have access to anything, you can't leave. Like, you're just stuck there and you have to do whatever it is they tell you to do, and they think they're so much smarter than you, or that you're just an idiot, you didn't go to med school, you don't know this stuff. And it's like, fuck off, you know what I mean? So um yeah. And then like I said, there's been times where they've started me on UTI medication, and then there's been times where I'll go in, and in the ER they're like, you have a UTI, and so they'll give me an antibiotic in the ER, and then they'll do the culture, and I'll be upstairs and I'll ask them like, so what's going on with the antibiotics, like, because you guys did the culture, so now we should know what kind of antibiotic I need to be on, right? And they're just like, oh yeah, no, you don't have a UTI. No, 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 you don't have a UTI. We sent it off to do the culture and it came back negative. And I'm like, so I was positive in the ER, but I'm negative in the culture. They're like, yeah, 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 sometimes that happens, you know what I mean? Like, it was just probably a false negative. Now this happened multiple times, so I mean, if it was false positive. So if it was false, like, how many faulty tests do you get? Like, I don't understand why it's coming up false so many times, but it never comes up false when I get tested at urgent cares, or other emergency rooms, or my PCP, or all the other places I've been tested at. It's never been a false negative. It's been, they do the culture and then they call me and they're like, you are on the right medication or you're not on the right medication, and we've sent in the new prescription. So that's frustrating, and I'm just like very upset about that. But they've done lots of things that I could be upset about. So I don't know. That was just one of the things that bothered me. She's like, they gave me my methadone 3 hours late. And I'm like, yeah, well, they made me go through a whole nother week of having a UTI because they refused to give me antibiotics. Fucking antibiotics. They refused to give me antibiotics. Like, are you serious? And yeah, so I always get tested when I get out because they're like, "Oh, you're positive in the ER," and then they give me a antibiotic in the ER, and then I get upstairs and they're like, "No, you're negative, you're negative." And then I'm like, "What the fuck?" So I get out and I go to my PCP and get tested, and I'm positive, and they put me on antibiotics, and then I clear the UTI. And there's been times when I've been up there and I've asked them, "Can you test me for a UTI because I'm experiencing the symptoms?" And they've tested me, and basically the same thing, where at first they're like, okay, yeah, you're positive for it, they'll give me an antibiotic for it for like a night, and then they're like, oh yeah, the culture came back and you don't actually have it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I was very confused, so I'm like, are they treating me when I don't even have a UTI and they're giving me all these antibiotics for no reason? Or do I actually have UTIs and they're just not treating me? Because then, if I did get tested at my PCP, a lot of times I would go back to those doctors and tell them, like, well, I did test positive. And they're like, maybe it's because you had a different infection. Maybe it was like, false positive in the ER, but then by the time you got to your PCP, you actually had one. And I'm just like, it's such a mind fuck. Um, and now it feels like I still get them pretty often, but um, I have some like supplements that are supposed to help with UTIs, so hopefully that'll help, because I know like that cycle of antibiotics becomes vicious because then it makes you more vulnerable to get more infections, and that's happened where like I'll have a UTI, so I'll start treating it, and then I'll get an ear infection, or I'll have a UTI and an ear infection at the same time. Um, so I had to be put on certain antibiotics because they're like, well, if you have a UTI and an ear infection, then we have to have you on a certain antibiotic. And then I don't know. It's just like